Welcome back into the Red Zone podcast. My name is Colten Bartholomew, EMU football beat reporter here for the Wisconsin State Journal, joined by longtime basketball and football beat reporter and now columnist Jim Polzin. Jim, we're coming off a weird and not all that great game for the Wisconsin Badgers football team, losing to Penn State 16-10 at home in the season opener. We're going to get into all that. I mean, we've got a lot of things to talk about from that game and then a game against Eastern Michigan, but just overall sense, like, I know you hear a lot from fans each week and each day, really, but what's kind of the feeling you get of how fans are feeling right now?
Literally everybody is scared of this offense and where it's heading and what it didn't do, which, after the way things went down the other day, I get it. There's a lot of people that want Graham Mertz benched. You expected that, certainly, too. There's just, a lot of unhappiness. And then the crazy thing is, Colton, and you know this, if that last series changes, if anything during that game changes, they win that game. And everything's not hunky-dory at that point, but still, it's a win over a ranked opponent to start the season, and I just think there's a lot less panic at this point. Yeah,
you're feeling coming off a win in that situation. A win when you play bad is awesome. It's still a win, and you just accept it. And then a loss where you play poorly and you just make the mistakes they did. It's rough. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to wrap up the Penn State game. We're going to talk about the loss of Leo Chenal for at least 2 weeks here after Leo posted on Instagram that he had tested positive for COVID. We're going to talk about this Eastern Michigan game coming up on Saturday. A little bit of a different challenge. Obviously not the talent that we saw from Penn State this weekend, but some things to talk about there. And then give you our Big Ten picks where special, a little sneak preview here. Jim is hot, everybody. Jim is hot on the picks. Ride Jim. Check these out toward the end of the podcast. We're going to get into all of that right after this. All right, Jim, we started a little bit in the intro there, but this Penn State game, the big takeaway that I had watching it live and then watching it again over the past couple of days, man, Wisconsin gave that away. Just the fumbles in the red zone. The interception from Mertz was bad, and the one that to end the game, it ends up on the stat sheet, but yeah, he's just chucking it up at the end of the game. That's not as bad. But, man, those fumbles in the red zone, the false start on Caden Lyles, it just is one of those situations where every time the Badgers felt like they were about to get that score, to really get the momentum, the crowd was going to go crazy, then it was turnover. Then it was, back themselves up with some, just disastrous mistake. It's such a weird thing to see because I think that's one of the strengths of Wisconsin is, like, it's cliche in sports, but usually they're not a team that beats themselves. Usually you've got to be buttoned up on your end to beat them. This is one of those situations where I really feel like Wisconsin beat themselves. Yeah,
and they can't beat themselves, right?
Right.
They can't do that because they're just not, especially in this game, they're not more talented than the other team lining up. It's such an even game in terms of talent. You've got to play a clean game, and they could have played not even a clean game and still won that. I mean, if you take away one of those mistakes, it's a completely different game. The one that the killer, and you and I kind of just looked at each other in disbelief, was Mertz fumbling as he goes back to handoff. I mean, it's first and goal at the 1. And Paul Chris said this Monday, you could probably sneak it 4 times and score, and it's over, right? But all you had to do was hand the ball off there, and at worst case scenario, you get back to the line of scrimmage, and then you try again. The fumble there just killed them, and it's hard to imagine a quarterback where he is in his development doing that, and that's why I was really critical of Mertz after the game. There was just a lot of things that are avoidable, and he did not avoid them.
Yeah, and I love when Paul said that actually on Monday at the press conference. You look back, why didn't we just sneak it 4 times, basically? And it's hard to argue because they were 4 for 4 on first downs when they went quarterback sneak. But the funny thing is, Chris admitted this on Monday, that was the play that they scored in the other end zone with Ches Maluzian. They had Garendo in the backfield. It was a play that was clearly working. It was a concept, not the same formation, obviously, with the goal line, but it was a concept that was working all game. Man, you get that handoff, more than likely going to be a touchdown. It's just rough. And you mentioned being critical of Mertz, and the internet, the world was pretty critical of Graham Mertz, and that's one of those things that ends up being a cost of doing business as a quarterback. The one thing that I push back on, though, and I think is lazy, I know you do too, this whole crapping on guys for not playing well, but then having like NIL deals, right? And that's something that is part of the territory when we're almost professionalizing college sports a little bit with NIL. And I'm for that. You guys have heard my takes on this in the podcast before, but just saying like, oh, Graham Mertz needs to focus more on football than NIL stuff. It's like Graham Mertz spends maybe 5 minutes a month, and I'm not kidding on that number. It might be 5 minutes a month on NIL stuff. His family takes care of all of that for him. His dad's a president basically of a wine marketing company. Like, there's nothing that Graham Mertz is taking away from football to do this NIL stuff, and I personally don't think that there are a lot of guys around the country in college football are either, but I know for a fact Graham Mertz isn't. So that's the only thing I will say. Like, criticize play. He put it on the field. That's your right as a fan to be upset about how he played, but to take that step of saying it's because of NIL stuff, that it's just it's a lame take, and just don't be that wrong when you're talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't mention that in my column at all. I just don't think it has any effect on what happened Saturday. Now, I will say this. Him doing all that stuff has made him a bigger target, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree.
I think people are, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but there's a portion of people out there, fans, that don't want to see athletes get paid. Mm-hmm. They think the scholarship's enough. I'm not going to sit here and argue about, that take. I disagree with it. I think they should be able to make money off their likeness. The thing is, when Mertz got here, people were making T-shirts with his likeness on it and selling them, right? And he wasn't getting a single dime from that. Mm-hmm. He should be able to get money off his name and likeness and image. It's to me, that's a no-brainer thing. But him doing this and him coming up with a logo and a brand is going to make him a target. And I think he understands that. I thought he was really good the other. I mean, you sat there, right, in his postgame. I thought he was really good. He was accountable. He knows that he played poorly.
Yep.
He knows there's stuff to fix. So I thought that was good to hear. But I do think that fans are going to jump on him in part because of the NIL stuff. And, another thing you can't really control is being a blue chip, 4-star, 5-star, whatever you want to give him, recruit. He didn't do that to himself, but he did come with a ton of hype. Mm-hmm. And the way he carries himself, he's cocky, which I think is fine.
Yeah, he's at that appropriate level of quarterback cocky, yes, where you got to think that, you can do whatever because you're the quarterback, or like you can do a lot of different things because you're a quarterback, and you got to have that. Like,
right.
You will be hard-pressed to find quarterbacks that don't have that are successful.
But those types of guys are not going to get the benefit of the doubt if something like this happens. Mm-hmm. Nor is he asking for it. That's the thing. Graham Mertz isn't asking for your pity party. But I just think that's part of what's coming on. And I think it's a lot of things. People are frustrated because this program underachieved last year. It's lost to Penn State now 7 of 8 times.
Yep.
Right? So there's becoming a trend of not beating the high-end teams, the ranked teams. And I think it all boiled over into frustration after that game Saturday, in part because of how it went down. They just had every chance to win that game and couldn't get it done. Yeah,
no, I agree. And, transitioning into a guy that wasn't on the field on Saturday, which is, I think, a big story, but maybe not as big as we originally thought, was Leo Chenal, the inside linebacker for the Badgers. Posted on his Instagram about an hour, maybe hour and a half, about an hour and a half before the game, that he was going to be out because he tested positive for COVID. I got a couple of emails and saw some people talking online about, what type of impact Leo Chenal would have made on that game. And my first reaction was, well, Leo Chenal doesn't play quarterback. He doesn't play the offensive line, which was two of the issues that the Badgers had. But the other thing is, that defense, especially in the front seven, they did their job. Yeah. There were some miscommunications in the back end, and I wrote an analysis of it. You can read on madison.com of some of the issues that they had and the big plays they let up. But the front seven on this Badgers defense did the job. They let up 50 yards of rushing, 34 of which came on one play. Now, it ended up being a scoring drive where that play kind of kicked off the drive. But at the same time, it was on the outside. It was a missed tackle and a misread by the safety. You're going to have a front seven, if you really start breaking it down, let up about 15 yards of offense, and everything else is on the outside or deep. So I don't know how much more Leo Chenal would have helped, to be honest. He's a great player, and I think he can have a great season when he comes back, assuming he's healthy and doesn't have any long-term effects. But I just don't know where you can say, if Leo plays, we win. I just don't think that. Yeah, right. We talked about a little bit before we started taping that maybe there's that one
impact play where he blitzes, sack, forces a fumble. That's what the one thing this defense didn't do in addition to those 3 or 4 plays that they gave up. They didn't create any turnovers. Herbig had a chance he had a really good move to get a sack. If he knocks the ball loose there, if they get an interception somewhere along the way, it maybe is a different game, especially in the first half where I think Wisconsin really had a chance to take control of this game. That didn't happen. That was really one of the knocks on the defense. But do we know for sure that Chenal could have made that any different had he played? No, we don't. I thought Mike Mascalunas did a really good job.
Yeah, he did. And it's funny, though, because I tweeted during the game, and I kept thinking of it throughout each time that the Badgers would shoot themselves in the foot in the red zone, the defense would come out and get a 3-and-out. It's like, you can't rely on this defense to be this good. Like, they played at a level in the first half and for parts of the second half where it's just like, that's unsustainable. That's near perfect defense. It's like a 3-and-out every time. It's a 3rd and long every time. That's the thing that this offense has got to do. They got to start rewarding this defense. And we're going to transition into talking this Eastern Michigan game here. And obviously it's a big talent drop-off from what they just saw in Michigan State. But that's the biggest thing. Like, it's been 2 years now. I mean, we're going back to the 2019 season where, this offense was really pulling its own weight. And that's something that if you're a defensive player on the team, like, you've got to be a little frustrated. It's like, man, Penn State's going to be a good offense. I would not be shocked if 16 points is the fewest they score all year with what they have offensively and some of the other teams they're going to play. And you only let up 16 at home against a really good offense, and you lost. Like, that's where the offense has got to start pulling its weight. Yeah,
the thing that in watching it again that really jumped out at me was, and I felt this way during the game, I thought they got to halftime at 0-0. They had blown some opportunities, but they had run so many more plays than Penn State. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this Penn State defense is going to be worn out. At some point, they're just going to, the dam's going to burst, and Wisconsin's going to be able to do whatever it wanted to do. That never happened, even though in the second half there was even more. I mean, they ran 95-some plays, right? I mean, it's crazy that Penn State Jaquan Brisker had to be taken off the field 3 times.
Yeah, could not get his right calf going, or I don't know what it was, but then he makes a huge play to really save them in the red zone.
They lose Ellis Brooks to a targeting late in the game. It's just I just kept waiting for that moment where Wisconsin just would break through and be able to move down the field pretty easily, and it never happened. And that was the biggest head scratcher from that game.
Yeah, for sure. So jumping into this Eastern Michigan game, Jim, Eastern Michigan played St. Francis out of Pennsylvania in their Week 1 game, won 35-15, which when you're talking about an FCS team versus the MAC team, you'd think it'd be a little more lopsided. But I think that kind of gives you an idea of what we're kind of going to be seeing on Saturday. I don't think Eastern Michigan's a very good team. The 2 things that I want to talk about offensively for them, since we were just talking about the Badgers' defense, they have this 2-quarterback system. One guy, Preston Hutchinson, who was their starter last year, averaged about 300 yards of total offense between rushing and throwing last season for him. He's still there. He played about a little over half the snaps. But then their second quarterback, Ben Bryant, is more of a pocket passer, definitely the better arm of the 2. These 2 guys are battling out, trying to figure out who the starter is going to be for the rest of the year. And if you guys remember, as Badger fans, the name Ben Bryant, he was originally committed to here in Madison back in 2018. That's the class that brought Chase Wolf in. The situation ended up being that Bryant was committed to Wisconsin. He ended up getting another offer from Georgia, and he tweeted about it. The Badgers, with already a quarterback in tow, and Chase Wolf and him, said, hey, we don't like that. Don't talk to other schools while you're committed here, and pulled their scholarship offer. We'll get into that in a story later this week if that's exactly what happened, and, you can debate the merits of if that's fair or whatnot. But past that point, then Ben Bryant is kind of sitting there without a scholarship, goes to Cincinnati. He's not playing there. Cincinnati's had, a really great year last year. He goes to Eastern Michigan, and now he's kind of in this quarterback battle. It's just a weird thing to think, like, that whole odyssey happens for him, and now he's playing at Camp Randall coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, the next 2 games are against guys that
has some that other guy.
Right, that other guy. We'll get to him later. It fascinates me that Ben Bryant went to a place that has a returning starter at quarterback, right? I mean, that whole process fascinates me. I'm curious to see how long Eastern Michigan goes before they decide to stick with one, especially, 2 guys that are completely different like that. So, Wisconsin guys were talking about that yesterday, just kind of the two quarterback system and getting used to that. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think the guys are different enough that they'll get used to it. I think this defense is going to bounce back with a really, really good game. Certainly there's no Jahan Dotson on the other team.
Right.
Right. And so I think, I would not be shocked actually to see a shutout in this game on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because I've watched a little bit of the tape from Eastern Michigan, and I'm just looking through their stats the last 2 years. This offensive line's bad. Like I'm trying to. That's a kind of a lazy way of putting it. It's just not good. And what we saw from Nick Herbig and Noah Burks and this front seven getting after the passer against Penn State, like they're going to have a long day. And that's why, honestly, I think that they might have to keep Preston Hutchinson back there more often because Bryant to be able to scramble around because I don't think there's going to be a lot of time for a guy like Bryant who's a little more stationary in the pocket. It's going to be. I was saying in our meeting we had a little bit ago, Jim. Like I honestly think that the Badgers could have 6 sacks, and it wouldn't be like all that big of a surprise just because of what they have up front at Eastern Michigan. This is one of those offenses and one of those teams I kind of talked about with Illinois a couple weeks ago. They have 23 returning starters, which sounds great, right? Like that every college coach would usually sign up for that, but they weren't good. They were 2-4 last year. Like, what does that matter if they played last year and they weren't good? I mean, maybe it helps a little bit, but I don't know. I just don't see it.
Quick time out here. What Eastern Michigan tape are you watching?
Oh, YouTube.
Oh, you just
people put up everything on YouTube.
So the St. Francis game, or are you watching old stuff?
St. Francis a little bit, and I mean, they controlled the line there, but the fact that it wasn't like dominant surprised me. St. Francis as the lower division team, it's not great.
Yeah.
So one of the other thing that I want to mention on this offense, because I think this is one of those situations where Eastern Michigan will watch what Penn State did to the Badgers defense with the tempo and some of the other things that Penn State was able to do, and try to copy that. Eastern Michigan already runs a pretty up-tempo scheme. But I would almost go the other way, because if you're Eastern Michigan, how many first downs do you really realistically say to yourself you're going to get? Like a dozen? If you have a solid day, right?
Yeah.
And that's when usually an up-tempo team gets going on their up-tempo. Like you got to get that first down. You've got to be able to move the chains, and then you start going. I just don't know how often you're going to be able to do that. And then if you have a bunch of 3-and-outs, this is what happened to Chip Kelly in the NFL. You go so fast, but then if you punt, your defense has way less time to rest and get reset, and then it puts them out there for so many more plays. And you're already playing Wisconsin, who's going to dominate the clock regardless and dominate the play count regardless. To me, if I'm Eastern Michigan, you got to slow yourself down. Like, do what you can do to execute and everything, but I just don't think that they have the horses on offense to make this up-tempo work, even though it worked for a team like Penn State last week against Wisconsin.
I'm all for slowing the game down, by the way. That 6 o'clock start, if we can have this puppy over in 3 hours, I'm for that. Yeah, what you're saying makes sense. I mean, and that a lot of times you'll see that from a team that's an underdog. I do wonder if they want to get too far away from what they want to be, right, their identity, and they're not probably coming to this game thinking they're going to win anyways, so do you really want to stray from what you are?
That's fair. Yeah, you got to get your game reps at the fastest level. That's a fair point too. I just think that you're putting at your defense at a disadvantage that's already going to be at if you try to go too fast. And switching over to the offense for the Badgers here, this is a situation where the offensive line's got to bounce back. Our old columnist and colleague Tom Oates tweeted out during the game on Saturday that the offensive lines and special teams, two things that need a lot of reps and need, games to get under the belt to get their, feet wet and understand what they're doing, both looked bad for both teams, right? And his take was that's why a lot of teams don't want to do these week one big conference games, and it's awesome for fans, right? Like it was a crazy atmosphere at Camp Randall, but I kind of saw his point too, and you saw it with both offensive lines. Penn State's offensive line struggled, and it really took about 3-4 series for the Badgers' offensive line to look like a Badgers' offensive line, the penetration that Penn State was getting. So this is a game where if you're the Badgers' offensive line, you got to bounce back, really control, and not just the line itself. You've got to reset the line 2-3 yards back. You've got to be blowing guys off because the talent discrepancy here is massive. Like Eastern Michigan's defensive line is rough. So I just think that this is a get back to your old school Badger, ground and pound type of system and let the offensive line eat. And honestly, we saw it in the Penn State game where they switched out the interior three for a series. Figure out who your best five is, because you've got a massive test in 2 weeks against Notre Dame. Like, not trying to overlook your opponent here, but talent-wise, you have to win this game, and I think pretty substantially. You've got to figure out offensive line-wise who you're going to go in that Notre Dame game with 2 weeks of practice under their belt.
I was going to ask you, do you think we'll see a different starting five than we did last week?
I don't know. Jack Nelson's a very good athlete and has a lot of potential as an offensive lineman. Michael Furtney outplayed him. Less snaps for Furtney. Nelson played more on Saturday. But from what I saw, I thought Michael Furtney at right guard was the best option. If that comes to pass, I'm not sure, because we both have written about and saw how much Joe Rudolph liked what Jack Nelson can do and the athleticism. And when you start getting into the better Big Ten games, that athleticism and that quickness is going to be really important, pass rushing wise and getting up to the second level. That's what I think the biggest issue that the Badgers had on their negative run plays and the things that didn't work on the offensive line. Their guards on both sides and their tackles were not getting to the second level. So it was basically, here Ches or here Isaac Rendo in the backfield. Here's a hole for a quick second. The linebacker is coming to unfettered and nobody in his way. Make something happen, and that's just not the formula for Wisconsin.
No, sometimes it did happen. I mean, I thought both of those guys had some nice runs, but too often I thought was the 2-yard gain and the 1-yard gain, and there wasn't room. When they got to the line of scrimmage, there was a guy waiting for them, and that happened way too often on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think I got this is going to be a season-long count that I'm going to be doing. But one thing that I think Paul Chryst has got to do, and I know it's tough for him when he looks at the strength of his team and how Graham Mertz was playing throughout the game on Saturday, but I think they got to throw more on first down. And I know this is like an age-old argument for the Badgers and the Paul Chryst offense, but I just think the teams know you're running on first down. You're just making it so tough. And then these second and longs coming back with another run, and I understand the mentality. Like, I don't want to get an incomplete pass on 2nd and 8, make it 3rd and 8, and then you're passing. At least get it to 3rd and, let's say, 4 or 5, and you got the options. But it's a little predictable is not the right word, but it's just too much formula, I think, for the Badgers. They've got to get off script a little bit and let Graham Mertz throw in some situations where the defense isn't expecting it. Because not that his performance, regardless of the situation, his performance wasn't up to par, but it didn't, I think, get helped by the play calling throughout the game. I think at times it did, but throughout the game, I think they could have done a little better there.
Yeah, and, the thing, you wrote about this last week, the lack of big plays, and it's
still there.
Still there, right? I mean, it turned out to be, not that we were expecting that it would change a ton this season, but I thought that was a good piece, and it was a good preview of what might come, and that's exactly what happened, is they're not getting enough chunk plays. So they had some really nice drives where, like, 14 plays and 70 yards, it takes 7 minutes off the clock, and then you get down to the goal line and shoot yourself in the foot, and it all goes to, it gets wasted. So I'd like to see some explosives in the passing game somehow. And even, Ches Malusi, I thought Ches Malusi had a chance. There was it 4th down play? 4th and 1?
He got tripped up.
Yeah, got tripped up.
Off the right side.
I kept thinking, and this is not a knock on Ches Malusi, but I kept thinking Jonathan Taylor takes that, right?
Yes, he absolutely does.
Right.
One of the greatest running backs of all time.
But it's Jonathan Taylor too,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's like, and that's another thing that I think this offense has been missing the last 2 years is the big runs where a guy turns a 2-yard run into a big gain or a 5-yard run into a really big gain. So I'd like to see more of that, and I think we will this week. Mm-hmm. The question is, do we see it against Notre Dame?
Right, and a couple other points on the offense. We didn't see Jalen Berger against Penn State, and you can go on madison.com and read my story about the lack of what Paul Chryst, I think, gave an explanation, basically that he liked what Ches Malusi and Isaac Rendo were doing and didn't feel like they needed to go to a third tailback. Okay, I don't know. I think Jalen Berger's talented enough and shown enough that there's a touch here or there, but I don't know how he's practicing. I don't know all the background, and that's the thing. And somebody tweeted this at me after I tweeted out the story, and I almost wanted to respond, but I was like, yeah, you know what, you're right. His take was Paul Chryst clearly has a reason that he doesn't want to share, and he's not going to, and we got to move on and just accept it. I'm like, Unfortunately, yeah, that's not entirely my job, but you're right. Clearly, he doesn't. There's something there that he doesn't want to. Let's say Berger's not practicing well. He doesn't want to bury him in that sense, or something that maybe personal going on. We don't know. Doesn't want to share that too. So there's I agree with that statement. There's something else there, but the likelihood of us finding out is pretty low, in my opinion.
Right, and this happens all the time with personnel decisions, and these coaches see so much more than we do.
Oh
right?
God, yeah.
They see the practices. They watch film from the practices. They watch the games. They watch film from the games. They see it all. They know this team better. They know the personnel better. They know the game better than all of us do. At some point, you got to say, there's got to be a reason, right? You have to trust their decision to some degree. I agree. There had to be a reason Jalen Berger wasn't playing. Now, it'd be nice to know, especially if he doesn't play this week. It'd be nice to know. What is there something bigger going on here?
Right. I would expect him in the first couple of series at least be out there. I don't know how many touches he'll get, but I would be surprised if we have another situation where he's not out there.
It was just really clear that he wasn't going to play last week, right?
Yeah, that was the weird thing too.
Yeah.
We all kind of. I know you guys at home saw it a lot because you saw the TV broadcast a little clearer, but a lot of times he was on the sideline without a helmet on, or not right next to Gary Brown, the running backs coach, where he would start getting subbed in. It was kind of clear, and we could see it in the press box too. That doesn't look like a guy who's ready.
String.
Yeah, he's third string or is a play away from playing. So it was a weird situation there. I think it gets remedied this week, and I think you wrote it really well in your column about Graham Mertz, and just kind of wrapping up the thoughts on the offense here. It doesn't matter what he does this week. Would it be great to see him, number one, get Chimere DK involved a little bit more? I thought it was weird that he only had 2 targets. Yeah. One that was a catch, and another one would have been a game-winning touchdown had the ball been better. I think clearly the guy's got the ability to get open. I was surprised that they weren't kind of finding a way to get him involved. But it's one of those tough things where if you're Graham Mertz, you individually need to bounce back and play better, but it doesn't matter what happens because it's a lesser opponent. And, I'm trying to remind myself, when he starts this game on Saturday, it'll only be his ninth career college start. So, basically late in his freshman season if it was, normal times and all that type of stuff. But it's just weird a third year, a guy who's been in the program and getting coached at the college level for 3 years, made the mistakes that he did and then had the game that he had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he needs a good performance Saturday just for his own well-being.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And I'm not saying he's lost his confidence or his mojo or whatever. I just think you need positive things to happen to you, and especially for him heading into what's going to be a big game against Notre Dame with a lot of storylines that involve him, but don't necessarily they're not about him. So I just think he needs a good performance to kind of build on.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, Jim, let's jump into our Big Ten picks. And as I told you guys off the top, Jim is hot. Last week, 7-3. All of the disagreements that we had last week, 6-3, 7-3 on the season. All the disagreements that we had about games, you won. So I went 3-6. So most of the Big Ten is playing lower competition this week. A couple of Power 5 versus Power 5 games, but not too many. We'll start off with one here. Illinois is going to Virginia. Illinois is coming off a tough loss that both of us actually predicted against the UTSA Roadrunners. And Virginia is a 10-point favorite over visiting Illinois, who I think, from what I've been reading, they're still going to have to start Sikowski. Brandon Peters is still hurt from the hit that he took in Week 1 against Nebraska. But I'm still going with I'll take Illinois in the 10.
Wow.
One, just because I think they can run the ball and control the clock. I just think 10 points is too much for Virginia. I know it's an early season road game, and I think that's a good system you're following, but I don't know. I just think 10 points is a lot.
That was my only reason, is that it's Illinois goes on the road, and I have no idea how it's going to react. Mm-hmm. And I know that is a little bit contradictory to what I've said about them in the past, that they're a veteran team. That's a lot of those guys have played a lot of football and certainly a lot of road games. But I don't know that they're ready for this.
That's fair. I would say this is probably the big matchup on the early slate in the Big Ten here. Oregon is going to Ohio State. This line jumped out to me. I don't get it. I know Oregon didn't play all that great in Week 1, but Ohio State's laying 14 points, and that's just a ton with a defense that did not look good. And I should mention this. We'll get to it in the next game too, but that opening week game, Minnesota against Ohio State, Minnesota was in that game up until the second Mo Ibrahim tears his Achilles.
Yep.
And that was awful to see, and it was very apparent on TV right away that what happened. But Minnesota, who has a massive talent gap, was in that game the whole way. And part of it's because C.J. Stroud was pretty rough at quarterback for Ohio State the first week. I don't think that's going to remedy itself against a better defense that fast. So I'm going to take Oregon in the 14. That's just too many points.
Me too, and I think Oregon's going to be able to move the ball on Ohio State.
Yes,
I mean, we saw
especially with they've got a couple of D-backs who, it's this classic college thing where the status report says they're out and they don't tell you why. I don't think they're hurt. I think there's some contact tracing or something going on there. But, some of their best D-backs are not playing or did not play and don't sound like they're playing this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. I'm anxious to watch it.
Yeah, that is the only
is that
positive.
A night game?
No, it's 11 a.m.
Okay,
I was about to say, that is the only positive of the Badger night game this week for us. Is that
I
we
know
can watch
fans
a little
hate
bit
these
there.
11 a.m. games, but I love them.
Oh, I do too. That's a story I've got to write sometime this year. I got to get a hold of Fox and be like, how great are these 11 a.m. games for you, and why do I love them so much?
Right, exactly.
Mix it in. So, speaking of Mo Ibrahim, Miami of Ohio is going to Minnesota this week. Mo Ibrahim, like I mentioned, tore his Achilles, going to be out for the season. Real tough. Big Ten's running back of the year last year. One of the nicest guys that was down at Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis, and just really rough to see a guy that I thought, was going to be a mid-round, probably a mid to late round draft pick because of the amount of miles he has in college. But I thought he was going to have an NFL future. It's going to be tough for him, I think, bouncing back from this. But all that being said, 19.5-point favorites against Miami. I'm still going to take Minnesota because I don't think Miami's any good, and Fleck needs a win.
Yeah.
And he's not a guy that's afraid to put some points on the board if he's up.
Yeah, Miami got drilled by Cincinnati last week, I think. Minnesota, the one thing that stood out about me, we knew Ibrahim would be able to run the ball. Their passing game was better than I thought it would be.
Yep.
Not great, but better than I thought it would be. So I think they're still going to be able to move the ball through the air. And they still have a really good offensive line. They'll be able to score points.
I was just about to say Minnesota's offensive line held up right until that strip sack that got returned by Ohio State for a touchdown. I think they held up decently well in pass blocking, and Miami doesn't have nearly the horses up front that Ohio State does. So we're both on Minnesota there. Another one we agree on, Rutgers is going to Syracuse. Rutgers is laying 2 points. I think unless you have a significant talent advantage, Rutgers is going to be a hard out for anybody. So 2 points on the road is not much. I mean, I'll take that. That's fine with me. So that's why I thought Rutgers is the pick here.
I'm on that train. By the way, Aaron Cruikshank had another really good game last week.
He did. Aaron Cruikshank is
in every facet. Like he a lot of touches, punt returns, kick returns, receiving. They handed off the ball to him a couple times. He would look really good in this offense. I mean,
he would help. We talked about the lack of explosive plays and playmakers. That's exactly what Cruikshank is, and it's tough seeing him. I mean, it's not. I've always thought he was a nice kid, and I'm glad that he's doing well. It's just like, man, for a Wisconsin perspective, it'd be nice if he was still around.
Right, exactly.
Purdue is playing at UConn this week. Purdue is a 33.5-point favorite. I am laying the 33.5 because UConn fired their head coach this week. And I don't know if you saw this video, Jim. UConn's getting destroyed last week. Their defensive coordinator is trying to fire him up and does the whole
the no high fives.
Does the whole hands in. Everyone just kind of stares at him. The vibes are all off with the UConn team. The UConn team that doesn't want to play football clearly does not feel like being out there. Jeff Brom is getting on the hot seat a little bit at Purdue. I think this is one of those situations that a team that's not all that great in Purdue faces a worse team and just has to bury them. Okay. So I'll lay it. I don't feel great about it, but I'm still going to lay it.
Yeah, I wish I would have known that. I saw that clip. I just didn't know that was UConn. I just thought that's so many points for Purdue.
It's fair, yeah. No, it definitely is.
That was my rationale.
I'm with you. Buffalo is going to Nebraska this week. Nebraska is a 13.5-point favorite. I want to personally...
It's apology time?
Oh, no. I mean...
Okay.
What do you mean apology time? Hold on, go ahead.
You said you were never going to pick Nebraska.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, this is not my fault, though. You can't... Okay. I just want to say I want to personally and professionally shame the scoreboard operator at Camp Randall that made us think that Fordham and Western Michigan were blasting, respectively, Nebraska and Michigan last week.
It was crazy. Like, the Western Michigan score came up first, and I was like, holy cow.
Yeah, it said 24-7 Western Michigan.
Right. I'm like, Jim Harbaugh is really in trouble. And then
Yeah.
it put up Fordham was up. I'm like, this can't be right. So I got on ESPN.com, and I'm like, yeah, they've got these reversed.
Yeah. Unfortunate there. But, yeah, I don't want to take Nebraska. I really don't. If Lance Leipold was still at Buffalo, I definitely wouldn't.
Right.
I'd be taking – it wouldn't be a 13.5-point spread if Lance Leipold is still there. But I'll take Nebraska begrudgingly because Buffalo just does not seem to have nearly the talent. And, I mean, like he did when he went to Buffalo from Whitewater. Leipold took a ton of the assistants, and that team basically had to rebuild on the fly in July. So it's unfortunate for them.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Nebraska, too. I think, beating Fordham is nothing to brag about or write home about, but I do think that they probably got some feel-good to that win and can carry it forward.
And when you think about what's coming up for Nebraska in the sense of going to Oklahoma,
right?
I think you've got to do.
This might be the last chance for feel good.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to feel good when you can.
Yeah.
This might be the other.
This might be the better game.
Yeah, but this might be the better game between the entire Big Ten slate. Iowa is going to Iowa State. Iowa blasted Indiana last week, in part because of 2 early pick sixes that really just sunk anything Indiana had going. But this Iowa team's good. If you're a Wisconsin fan, start getting nervous for that late October game because Iowa is really good. But Iowa's going to Iowa State. Iowa State is a 4.5-point favorite. It's too much.
Yeah, that's what I said too.
If it was 3, I probably would lay it, but 4.5 is too much. Iowa's defense is too good, and they know each other too well. They play every year. Like we're both on Iowa, and that's honestly the pick I feel best about, getting Iowa in points there. It's going to be a crazy atmosphere. It's going to be an awesome game. I wish we could watch more of it. It's going to start, and then our game's going to start about an hour and a half later. But I just think Iowa's too good this year, and Iowa State they won, but they laid a stinker last week against Northern Iowa. For whatever reason, Matt Campbell's team starts slow. So I don't see that fixing quickly here against Iowa.
I agree. I think it's going to be close. I mean, I think Iowa State could win this game, but I don't see it being any more than a field goal game.
For sure. When's the last time, besides like a Jonathan Taylor a few years ago, that anybody ran all over Iowa? Because that's what Iowa State does to a lot of people, right?
Right.
So I just don't see that happening. Here's one we disagree on. Washington is going to Michigan. Michigan is a 6-point favorite at home. Washington lost to Montana on Saturday. That's bad, like epically bad. And I just think that you add that factor into West Coast team coming to the Midwest. It matters more in the NFL for some reason than college, I feel like, in the betting world. But I think it matters a little bit here. So I'm going to take Michigan in the 6. But if it was 7, I'd probably go the other way. Okay. The fact that it's 6 is a big factor.
Yeah, I'm not overly confident in this one. Michigan lost Ronnie Bell. I think that hurts. I don't know. The embarrassment of Washington's Week 1 performance, I thought would make them, bounce back in Week 2.
That's fair. How upset do you think Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan staff is watching Zach Charbonnet kill it at UCLA?
I know.
Like, I don't know. I probably should read up on it before I talk about it. But I just don't know how you let that guy leave. Like, you're a team that needs to run the ball. I mean, I know they're trying to be more spread-ish with Josh Gaddis, but you've still got to run the ball to be effective, and that guy clearly can run the ball out of a spread offense. It's a bad look. The better he does, it's a worse look. A little bit like the Crookshank thing. The better that Charbonnet does at UCLA, the worse it looks for Michigan.
Right.
All right, so now we've got Youngstown State going to Michigan State. Michigan State is a 19.5-point favorite. That's a ton of points, but what Michigan State just did at Northwestern, I think, has gotten a lot of people's eyes open against a lower competition here. Kenneth Walker looks like
he looked really good.
He looked really good, and then when you add in the fact that I think the Buckeyes have 3 running backs, and they're going to rotate them all. I don't think anybody's going to be getting a ton of carries for them individually. Kenneth Walker might be the front runner for Big Ten running back of the year now that Mo Ibrahim's out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This is a situation where I think Michigan State's going to run it up again, and we're both on Michigan State there, even though it's 19.5. But that kid's really good, and that offensive line's way better than I would have expected.
We talked about this, I think, a little bit last week. They've got some stud wide receivers too. Their quarterback, I thought was solid. Not spectacular. Thorne, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
Solid though. I think that offense is good. I think, Mel Tucker talked about kind of getting a talent increase quickly, and I think people were skeptical of it, but I think he did bring in a lot of really good players that are making instant impacts.
Yeah, the big theme of the weekend, I think, was the transfer impact on the Big Ten this year. I mean, obviously, Mo Ibrahim ended up being a bigger story with his injury, but you talk about the guys at Penn State, like I was gonna kill his pronunciation, but he was a transfer defensive end. He killed it. Yep. I mean, shut me up. I thought he wasn't going to be all that good. Kenneth Walker, ton of other guys. I mean, not that beating Fordham's a big deal, but Samori Toure and Marquise Stepp over in Nebraska had huge games in that win. So transfers making a big impact all around the Big Ten this week. Another one here, Ball State's going to Penn State, 20.5-point favorite for Penn State. I think I'm on Penn State here because I think that offense is going to light up a bad team. Like, the fact that Wisconsin held them to 16, like I mentioned, I think is pretty remarkable for the talent they have. I think they're going to run it up, and I just don't think Ball State's going to be able to hang with that.
So I took Ball State, and here's why. Because Wisconsin ran 95 plays last week, I wonder how beat up that Penn State defense is going to be. I wonder if a guy like Brisker will even play.
That's a fair point.
And Brooks is out the first half, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know. I think that game could be closer just because I wonder from a physical and even a mental standpoint how Penn State's going to be after that grinder of a game.
That's a good point that I didn't all that much consider, but I also think that this could be like a Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington had 3 touchdowns apiece.
Completely fair. Yeah.
So, next one here, Indiana State's going to Northwestern. We're getting into some of these games that I had to search all over to find a line. Like Howard's at Maryland. You won't hear us talk about that because there is no line. Being straight up here, I didn't know Howard had football. Wow. So, good for them. That's nice. But Indiana State's going to Northwestern. Northwestern is a 26.5-point favorite. We're both on Indiana State because Northwestern, yikes.
Right.
This is the roller coaster of Northwestern.
Yeah.
Like, it's every other year.
They'll be really good next year.
Yeah, this is insane.
Yeah. And that's what, watching that Michigan State Northwestern game, I couldn't tell was I getting too impressed by Michigan State because of how good they looked, or was it a reflection on Northwestern because they just, I mean, what surprised me the most, like, I think we know that, like, Hunter Johnson didn't actually play that bad.
No. He had some really good throws on the sideline.
It was Northwestern's defensive line getting blown off the ball, and I had forgotten that Mike Hankwitz retired.
That's fair.
Probably should have considered that when making my pick last week. He was there as an honorary captain, but he's no longer the defensive coordinator. And so I think there's some adjustments there, and I just think, man, they did not look good on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah,
and the big drop-off from guys like Patty Fisher and Blake Gallagher to this next crop of linebackers. And, same thing that I said about Wisconsin, like playing a Big Ten game to start your season, especially when you've got some inexperienced guys at key spots, it makes sense. But at the same time, 26.5 points, we both feel too many there. Wrapping up here with the Wisconsin line, Eastern Michigan coming to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a 26-point favorite. We are both on Wisconsin. And, Jim, my take is this team needs a pick-me-up going into the bye week, especially offensively. They've got to put up some points. And I think you said earlier, this is a shutout candidate in my mind defensively. So if you think that way, or even if you say let's get to 7, 35, 38 points is not that much to say for this offense against this defense. So I think pretty confidently 26 is okay to lay down with.
Yeah, I said 38-7 was kind of my number I threw out there. I'd really like to see a clean game. Just some of the stuff that they affected them last week, just get away from that. Mertz, I'd like to see have a solid game. He doesn't have to be spectacular, but just bounce back.
No, I'm with you there. All right, make sure you guys are on madison.com checking out all of our work and get subscribed. It is $1 for 6 months of all access online. That gives you all football season throughout a bowl, and then most of basketball and hockey seasons, both basketball teams. Some interesting storylines going into the new year. I mean, the women have a new coach, and then everything that you've read about the men's team, Johnny Davis stepping up, and then obviously both men's and women's hockey teams coming off huge seasons and another national title for the women. Make sure you're on madison.com, getting subscribed to all that. $1 for 6 months. Jim, anything you want people to know about coming up this week?
Men's basketball schedule will be out by the time this comes out.
It will, yeah. Make sure you're on madison.com checking that out.
We know that's coming this week. I'll be up in Green Bay Wednesday.
It is Packer season too now.
It's Packer season. 6 p.m. Wisconsin Eastern Michigan game Saturday night. I will be on a plane to Jacksonville 6 a.m. Sunday morning. So fun weekend this weekend.
Have you texted Tom Oates to figure out how to do this whole do all the travel, do all the work, and then not sleep basically? Because that's kind of what he did.
Right.
He would go 48 hours ish.
Right. I don't know that I can handle that. I'm a guy that needs my sleep, so we're gonna see how. Check back a week from now when we do the podcast and see how pleasant I am.
Sure, and I'm saying that's assuming you show up for the podcast in a week. You'll probably just text me, piss off, and I'm good. All right, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next week.